What happens if you give a guy with a loud voice a microphone? I reckon you will have no problems listening in to my presentation here today. So, good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sjoerd. I work for AGCO Finance. So we're moving away from the police to financing of agricultural machinery. And we're moving away from the Department of HR to operations. And what I do within AGCO Finance is that I'm working on improving efficiency and service levels. So trying to make the processes more efficient, make them better, make them quicker, make them smarter. So, what can you expect in this presentation here today? So I'm trying to take you along a process mining exercise that we've completed last year. Not just telling you what we've done and what the results have been, but really focusing on the how and all the different stages that we've gone through to get to those results. And, I think in order to manage expectations and tell you a little bit about what you can expect from the next 40, 45 minutes or so is that, just like some of yourselves, I'm not a process mining pro. I consider myself a rookie. I think this has been the first real kind of process mining project that I've done within the business. So I'm hoping that the content is going to be relatively simple to understand. And second of all is that, it's more than just a fancy PowerPoint, and we really try to include screenshots from the relevant screens of Disco to kind of show you, how we've done what we've done. So let's start with telling you a little bit more about what AGCO Finance is and what we do. So AGCO Finance is a joint venture between two businesses. AGCO, they're a company listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and they manufacture agricultural machinery. You might not be familiar with AGCO, but you might have seen tractors out in the field or harvesters. And they can be branded Fendt, they're green. They can be Massey Ferguson, they can be red or Valtra. And they've partnered up with a subsidiary company of Rabobank, DLL. And DLL's got kind of a separate branch that's created a joint venture with AGCO. And that's what we call AGCO Finance. So AGCO sells the machines to clients, to customers. But these machines can be up to €500,000, if not more. So most of our customers, farmers and contractors, are not able to purchase those machines outright. So they want to pay per month or quarter or year or per hour. And that's where we come in. So as AGCO Finance, we provide the funding that allows our customers to kind of acquire and use these machines for farming. And let's make it a little bit more specific then. So what I've said is we move away from HR to operations. And, this is a picture that's from pre-COVID, from a peak pre-COVID time. But you might struggle understanding, but what's your product? What's your processes if you finance tractors, amongst others? Well, like our product is paperwork, right? So with every underlying deal that we do, there's kind of paperwork that we require from customers. We need an invoice that details what the machinery is and what the amount is that it's been sold for. We need a contract with the customer that needs to be signed and a few other things. And you can probably imagine that when, that paperwork is not gonna just go to the customer like that and it's gonna be coming back. There's a process for that, right? And as you see in this picture over here, that process includes many, many different documents. And, we've even been color coding these different documents at some stage, indicating that they've gone from one department to the other, one member to the other. So the whole project that we've done, it's been done within operations. The processing, basically the process that requires processing a deal from the time that our documents start coming back. And we're gonna kind of get ready to switch on that direct debit, to start debiting payments from our customers, and to start giving our dealers who sell the equipment kind of the money that they deserve because of the sale, so they can have their revenue recognition. So that's a little bit of context. And then, what we've done over here is that it was probably end of 2020, early 2021, I think, that, the whole buzzword process mining came to us. Now finding out that the first process mining camp's already been in 2012. So it sounds like we're a little bit behind. But why we're so interested in this is that as AGCO Finance, we're very, very interested in improving our service levels, right? And why we're interested in improving our service levels is because we believe that in such a competitive market that we're in, there's only a few ways that we can differentiate ourselves from competition. And 3 of those ways are, we can do that via our digital tooling, we can do that via the products and services that we use, and we can do that via service levels. Makes this very important. But improving service levels isn't as simple as, you need some data to support that. That is where process mining is becoming very, very interesting. So what we've done is, buzzword process mining, what do we do with that? How do we get started? I mean, I wasn't sure at all. But we wanted to understand how it fits our strategy and what it can bring to the business. So what do? You do a pilot. And, we're in many, many different markets. But you start small. So we've chosen one country, Germany. And then one question we've had as well wasn't about the where, but about the who. So is this something that we need to outsource to a consultancy company, and we give them the data set and we tell them, you give us the insights, and then we determine how process mining can be relevant for us and how it fits our strategy? But actually, I think, what was interesting, what was for us the most interesting to learn is, it isn't about the result, it was about the journey. So that only left us with one option, and that is, we'll need to do it ourselves. And that's where I just, got started with some support of Rudy. That was much appreciated. So we've done Germany, we've had one data set. So we were fortunate enough that the information that included the events, the activities, we didn't have to consolidate data from different systems for this pilot, which for me made it an interesting pilot because that reduced the amount of complexity. So, I like structure, so we developed a little bit of a checklist. What are the different stages that we've gone through with this project, with this proof of concept? So we start with, hey, we need the data. Then we done some validation. So whatever we're going to be loading into Disco, is that going to be correct, or is there some tidying up that we need to do? Then we've gone through the discovery process, as in, okay, so what are we seeing here, and how can we make it more concrete, make it more small? We'll start out with a spaghetti diagram that we'll see in a second. But yeah, how can you make it more meaningful? Then we're going to come up with some research questions. And then we're going to do our analysis in Disco, and it's a continuous refinement process where every time you think you've answered the question, there's another question, and there's another question, and there's another question. At some stage, it became a little bit frustrating even. When do these questions stop? But that was the level that we needed in order to make the results meaningful for the business. And then we wrap it up. So, you come up with your conclusions and you start sharing those results to senior management, the country manager of Germany, members from the department. So it's going to stick. We're going to, identify which actions we're going to be taking. So, and really the focus of this presentation, I'm not going to be talking a hell of a lot about, stage 1, 2, and 6. The focus is on 3, 4, and 5. So those 3 stages, in my view, make or break kind of the outcome of the whole project. And I'm hoping that by showing you those disco print screens and the structure that we've had, that approach might resonate with yourselves as well. Because regardless of, I think, the data that you're looking at, the approach, I think, is very much reproducible. So stage 1 and 2, just one slide and a few comments on that. So the data was actually readily available. But I know as a business, we're in many other countries and use many different systems. Sometimes you need to run queries, and it takes a few iterations before you've got the data that you need, and you need to submit kind of a PBI for that, and it needs to be prioritized, and it takes you 3 to 6 months before you actually have got a data set. Fortunately, for a pilot, again, data was readily available, and that was great. Then when we weren't sure exactly what does Disco need, so whatever we could get out of the system, we chug it into Disco. That was our approach. And then we were lucky because kind of the whole format of the data, one line item in Excel was one activity. Hey, Disco likes that, so great. That was good for us. We didn't have to turn the whole format of the spreadsheet upside down. Then we've loaded it into Disco. We only needed a limited amount of tidying up of the data. Really, one of the only things that we came across was there were some tasks that didn't have an end date or an end time. So somehow what happened in the process is that was kind of marked as 1900. And that turned everything a little bit on its head. So we recognized that, we went back, we've cleaned it up, we've reloaded into Disco, ready to go. And then when I speak to members in Germany and you tell me what that process is going to be about, that whole process when documents start coming back, and then what do we do until the deal's all sorted and the money is in the bank account of our partner. Doesn't look like that. It was a lot more simple. So this is the spaghetti diagram, unfiltered. This is our starting point. So when I've seen this for the first time, I was, okay, so how is this project going to go from here? So what's going to be next? We need to start slicing and dicing and filtering this down. And then how do we do that? So I think the first thing that we've done is just moving the path slicer. Moving it from 100 to 0 is almost a little bit of a magic trick. So it started making a lot more sense. But at the same time, it's still not that process, I think, that colleagues have explained to me. And just before we progress, I think I'm not going to tell you all about the different events that you see, but just to take you on board, I think, on 3 important ones that we'll continue to look at in the remainder of this presentation. Checkpoint 1, checkpoint 2, checkpoint 3. Checkpoint 1 is when we start receiving documents back. So that means that we need to start working that deal. We need to start checking things and making sure that everything's spot on. And then checkpoint 2 means that everything's spot on. That means that we need to book or we need to activate the application. That means that we switch on that direct debit and that there's no way back, right? And then step 3 is that, from a dealer's perspective, for every single deal, we start collecting payments from our customers. But when we do that from day 0, we need to pay whoever sold that equipment. So we need to pay out an amount. That's what happens in checkpoint 3. And then the deal's paid out. That's our final event. So after we've kind of worked that path slicer, then we've looked at the variance, because there were still loads of different variants in that data set. So we try to take that out. So what we've done is there was a little bit of playing around with it, trying to tweak that variation filter. So you're reducing your amount of different variants to less than 1%. You also significantly reduce your sample that you're analyzing as a result of that. But, keep it stupid simple. That was the design principle for this whole exercise, particularly if you do it for the first time and it's a pilot. So this is what we've done. And then I think when we started looking at the outcome of that, it resonated with me a lot more, as it did with colleagues who explained me what that process was in their own words, right? But and then we start just using common sense to look at that, because obviously we've played around with the data now a little bit. We've kept it deliberately small, and now we need to start, moving from here we've got a chart to what are going to be our research questions? What are we going to be analyzing exactly? And then it became clear that, well, there's actually two different processes in here. There's one process that ends with what we call paid out. So that is kind of prior to this whole exercise. That's our endpoint, But also a process that ends with withdrawn. So somehow in the process, the deal can be somewhere, and then all of a sudden it's not going ahead anymore. So, we've obviously looked at both processes, but for the sake of this presentation, again, the next kind of filter that we do is we're just going to focus on the flow that kind of ends with paid out. And then what we do is we need to go back. So back to spaghetti diagram, because we've used a variation filter, we've sliced and diced the data. We've now set our scope, right? We want to look at deals that are paid out. So go back to start, right? And then what we do is we take out the deals that kind of have been withdrawn. So we want to filter on those deals that have not been withdrawn. Now, then what we do is we get a chart where we can look at the performance dimension and the flow dimension. And this is where you sit down with kind of a member of the business and you're like, well, this is something that should look familiar. So what are the things that stand out a little bit? And that's partly just using common sense, because even if you don't understand the process inside out, I think you can summarize a number of questions. But if you're interested in what type of SLAs are there, what are expectations, certain going from A to B shouldn't take more than 4 hours, 8 hours. That's where you need a representative of the business to tell you exactly that, so you can formulate a research question for that. So we make a nice list of research questions. Again, combination of common sense, as well as, using a little bit of context. And then, I'm not going to call out all research questions, but, one that is very, very interesting is if we want to make our processes more efficient, then we need to look at the amount of rework. Within our company, first time right is quite a big thing. So where's their duplication in activities? So we thought it was interesting for this presentation here. Let's just look at that research question and all the follow-up questions that we're getting to when we're gonna kind of zoom in and get into it. So what do we need to do now? We just want to look at. And that's actually from the process mining book. There were a few strategies, but you might now think, hey, we've looked at strategy number 1, strategy number 2, because we've used the path slicer. We've done strategy number 2, which looks at the variation. And I think strategy number 3 was to kind of just look at deal spending or take them out. So anything which is kind of in the pipeline somewhere, We're not looking at that. We're looking at deals that have made it to the end point, deals that have been paid out, deals that have been finished. So we're filtering on that. And then the next thing that we want to do is, we want to look at any task in that flow somewhere that's coming back a minimum of one time. So what we use is we use a follow-up filter. And that follow-up filter, it basically marks everything, which means that we want to see everything that comes back minimum of one time. And then we see a chart. And there's a few interesting things, over there. You see that there seem to be some deals that make it all the way to the end, and then they go all the way back to start. That's weird. How can something be finished, but then it's not finished and it's starting all over again? We see, and and we see many other things, but the other thing that stands out really is that a deal's reached finish, which means paid out, but then it goes in there again. So how can a deal be paid out twice or 3 times or 4 times? That doesn't make any sense. That's weird. So for the sake of this presentation, and also I think for some of the key takeaways is, actually we've now pretty much answered our first research question, because we've looked at where in the process there's duplication. Here you go. Yeah, but that's not the end of it. So, now there's another question. And one of those questions is, but why are deals going into paid out more than once? So there's a follow-up question. How do we look at that? An endpoint filter. So our starting point is the paid out activity, and we want to see any event that follows after that. So what happens after paid out? We see 2 things really that I'd like to highlight. So first of all, there's deals that are finished and they go back to checkpoint 2. Remember, checkpoint 2 is kind of the stage where, we're about to switch on that deal for the customer, but everything should be there. So how can it be that a deal's finished and paid out and it goes back to that stage where we're about to switch it on to the customer? That's weird. And then the other one, and that one's in your face, it's dark blue, so it seems to happen quite a little bit, is a deal going into paid out more than once. What does that mean? Does that mean that if I'm a dealer and I've sold a machine, I'm getting paid twice? That would be quite a significant operational risk, no? Or what actually attributes to that? So, what we've done in this case is, one of those questions was, why is a deal going back to that stage where we're about to kind of switch the deal on for the customer and switch on that direct debit? Let's look at that. So there's another sub-question. So we've moved from where's there duplication in the process to what happens after the deal's finished to why is a deal going from finish back to checkpoint 2. So another filter, attribute filter, where we're interested in checkpoint 2. So let's filter on those events or deals that are have got that criteria. And that is where it gets really specific if you're working in Germany, in our case. Because, they like the flow charts and they like the results and they like they like the whole kind of the surprises that are coming out of the exercise. But if you really want to dig into it, they're like, give me some contract numbers. Right? So we'll need examples. So here's 5 examples in this case. So we've given them the contract numbers, and then, they could take that away and they could investigate, what's truly the root cause. So what's the context or the story for that particular agreement, why it's gone back. And that made it really interesting, I think. So that was, before we go to the key takeaways, I think the whole process where we've gone from process discovery to setting up some research questions, but even more importantly, that whole stage where you analyze, you discuss, you refine, you've got another question, and you keep on doing that. until there's no additional questions that you can make up. So a few conclusions from the exercise that we've done. So we started out with our spaghetti diagram. Yeah, but spaghetti is quite difficult to analyze and to follow, so we had to chop it into lasagna, right? So we've significantly reduced our sample of events by focusing just on the variants that make up less than 1% of all of the data. Then the second one is that what we've learned is you develop one research question, you answer that, and there's going to be another one, and another one, and another one. And that's good, because if you don't have that, I don't think you're getting to the level of detail where the results are going to be meaningful and they're going to be stick in the business. Third of all, I think really what we've done is every time we've answered one question, like, well, why is this the case exactly? So, okay, another question. And why is this happening? Another question. So we kind of continued until we couldn't ask why anymore. And the last one, I think, is that, and it's been mentioned in, the previous presentations as well, is, that engagement from kind of somebody who lives and breathes that process is quite critical. It's a little bit like Batman and Robin. You need both to be successful. And also it's different than a traditional reporting exercise, where here's a report, we've got one discussion, blah, 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 looks good, what's the follow-up, off we go. Now this is more of a journey. It requires multiple meetings, multiple iterations until you've got that final meeting where you'll decide on what's next, priorities, action points. And so what have we learned from our pilot? And one of the first conclusions, I think, for us, for myself, was that, what we're recording doesn't exactly or fully fit the true linear flow of that process. So we've got a little bit of an issue with how we're recording our events, right? And sometimes we're recording an event, but it's not specific enough. So we're recording activity that consists out of multiple sub-activities that are done at different times. So really, if we want to improve, I think, how meaningful the results of process mining can be, then we need to go back to kind of the raw data, and we need to start sorting out the way that we record relevant timestamps. And that's a priority for the whole of the business, because otherwise it's going to be garbage in, garbage out, right? Second of all is that while we've got the spaghetti diagram to start with, is some of these timestamps are automatically recorded, others are recorded manually. Well, whenever things are recorded manually, right, it all comes down to what's your way of working. I move a deal from A to B to C, but you move a deal from A to C to B. Yeah, and that is where process mining becomes impossible. Huh? So we really need to, if we can't automate the timestamp, we really need to start hammering on, clear work instructions and policing that. So kind of the reports, the insights, the process mining exercise, we're gonna beef up how useful that's gonna be. And then before we were just looking at averages. The average time that it takes us to pay out our dealers is X number of hours. Yeah, and I mean, I've been there a lot of times, and then you get a lot of pushback from people. Yeah, but Sjoerd, we've had these 2 deals in there, and even though the average might have been 4 days, this deal has been in there for 100 days, so it messes up our average. So I don't really think it's fair that you start, particularly if it's used in KPIs, that you start including those type of deals. Well, great. With process mining, I think the eye opener has been the median. So to take out all of those very, very tough conversations, if you start putting such targets and bonus targets of members, and you want to make it fair to people, I think the median is a better way of being fair, because you don't have those discussions anymore about those outliers that you're including in the way that you're rewarding or penalizing people as well. And I think that, for me, it was also clear that the whole concept of measuring processes has been relatively new for the business. And, because it's relatively new, if you want to set up that whole infrastructure from, just simple reports, is we want to monitor on a monthly basis kind of the number of hours it takes us to pay out an application from the time we receive the documents back. You can argue, let's export the data, and every month we'll refresh it, we'll put it into Power BI, we'll have a report, but frankly, in a lot of cases, we don't have that for all markets yet. So I think that process mining's got different benefits, but one of the benefits, I think, is also that if you don't have the structural kind of foundation of extracting information and putting that into some sort of a reporting tool and sharing those insights with managers and members, actually process mining is a great way to get a zero measurement, So instead of having to, to sort out all that structural work where you need IT and where you need to set up the whole data chain, if you've got a data set, you can put it into process mining and it gives you an insight. What is it now? And although it might be kind of just, kind of a one-off analysis at that stage, I think it gives you that understanding of the process, what the throughput times are, and then you can start thinking about, how can we continue to use process mining whilst also investing in, creating some basic reports that are accessible for everybody on a monthly basis or a periodic basis to have those insights. So, process mining for me is a much quicker way of getting to something, so you understand how good it is or how bad it is and what the next steps are going to be. So, I'm still got 3 minutes, I think, so that was it from my side. I guess this is where we're going to be opening it up for questions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. You really took us through the different stages. That was very, very good to see. I'll think about questions for Sjoerd. I'll start with the first question. We have 15 minutes for questions. So I really liked the takeaway at the end where you said managing expectations, right? That people don't expect this to be over at once, but that they understand this takes multiple steps. But my question is about the beginning. So you said you were wondering, should I do process mining myself or should I hire someone to do it for you? So I was wondering, did you have concerns in the beginning, like whether you could do it yourself, or was it more kind of whether you had the time, or what were the concerns, and how do you look back now at the end?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I mean, the concerns were, I guess, that it referred back to a previous process mining. To me, it sounded like a real discipline. So I thought, you probably need, a little bit of experience in order to, to truly exploit its full potential. And can I kind of do that whilst I'm learning? Or do we need somebody who's been doing it already for a minimum of 5 years? So, and I think that just by myself, without any support, like here's your license to Disco and start sorting it out, I wasn't able to get there. So I've obviously got some support. So Rudy's helped me out to kind of where I got stuck to help me to keep going. But in hindsight, I think that that even though I didn't have the experience, it was easier than I expected that it would be. And if you would ask me now can you do it again with another data set, and then maybe with less or no support from Rudy? I think probably yes, because we've now got a clear structure, right? I can refer back to the checklist. I can refer back to all the different analyses and filters that we've done in Disco. But I think for what we're looking for in AGCO Finance, that's very much reproducible, right? I can copy and paste that. We've got different data. I might need to tweak it here and there. So yeah, from my perspective, I think initially I thought we either need to start hiring process mining specialists. So we set up a new department, or we're going to outsource it. And here's the data set, and you give us back the insights. So I think, conclusion from my perspective is that, this is something that we can do ourselves. But we need to have a minimum level of support, I think.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, let's take the microphone over there for, yes, you.
Yeah, my question actually was related to that question that you just asked. You've done this for the first time, and the previous presenters are basically now specialists in the area of process mining. Is it easy then to roll this out into a larger organization, empower others to do the same thing? You mentioned now you might need some center of excellence, you need somebody to support, but is this a craft that you can actually roll out through a larger organization internationally, enable others in other countries of the same organization to do the same thing?
I think so, yes, because what we've got in our business is we've got an operational excellence team, and we've got members in most markets that are improving processes. So essentially what we've been doing over the past few years is that we've been developing their process mining skill set. So instead of improving processes based on Lean Six Sigma principles or Lean principles, we started investing in training and a license to Disco so they can start developing their process mining competencies as well with the necessary support. So I think that's working. And I also think that, like I've said, I think we've got members in different countries who can process a data set into some relevant insights. But I think for us, it's now not so much the process mining competencies in the business, but it's more that we need to go back to sorting out the way how we record some of the events so we can make the process mining analyses more meaningful going forward.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Ja, het is niet kapot. Hij doet het nog. Sjoerd, hallo. In English, of course. So I took a look at the website in the meanwhile. It is a true international company from Duluth, Georgia, USA. You work from the Netherlands, just to get some context. Yourself?
Yes, I work from the Netherlands. I've also worked in the UK and in Australia, but I'm based from the Netherlands.
So my question is indeed related. How is this competence center organized, and how do you reach out to all the different departments you have globally?
It's a good question. So the competence center that we've got right now is, as I've said, is we're part of DLL. And DLL's got a competence center with members in every country. And we can tap into that competence center as AGCO Finance, right? I'm just working for AGCO Finance, but we've got Luca, for instance, here who, works for DLL, and she's part of the competence center. So, if we want to do an analysis, for instance, in France for process mining, then, she's the expert who's comfortable and familiar with the data, and she can help us to do that deep dive for AGCO Finance for us as a business unit.
Okay, we have a question over here in the corner.
Hi, thanks for the interesting presentation. I have two questions actually. Now that you have discovered the process, are you also looking into how to predict, for example, which clients are going to pay in time, or what are the risks in the different context of your business.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so I think, can you repeat your question?
Yeah,
again?
the question is actually, are you also moving forward from discovering the process to predicting the process and maybe doing some forecasting based on your process mining?
Yeah, I think the answer is that we're not doing any forecasting or predicting as of yet. I think what we are doing is that we're using the kind of insights from process mining on how long certain things currently take to set some expectations, right? And because in a lot of cases, you know, like we said, we're quite new to opening up the throughput times amongst others of our processes, so it's not yet that well integrated in the expectations and KPIs of countries and members that we can use the process mining insights as a zero measurement to, you know, start set based on what it's now. We set an expectation, for instance, for next year, and then we start monitoring that in a similar way. So that's what we're doing, but I don't think that's really, forecasting. But it is a way that we're trying to, to use the insights and integrate that into, kind of our way of working and what we expect from different processes going forward, and make it realistic. Because we don't want to expect something of a process where, if it currently, for instance, takes you a day, and we're expecting an hour, then that might not be fair to ask that as of yet from countries and members.
The second question has to do with, you mentioned that you're looking into how the timestamps are recorded in the first place. Have you found a way to integrate that sort of requirement in the specs when the IT department or other parts of the company buy new software products and new applications? Because I think that there I see a huge challenge.
Yeah, and I share that challenge. And I think, frankly, we have not been good at that. I think how I reflect on it, and I'm not involved in all systems and all countries, is that frequently kind of the recording of different events, that's not part of the MVP of a new system, right? So, and as a result of that, I think the way that we're recording things, that doesn't match whatever the linear flow is, how the process works. And therefore, I think the insights aren't meeting the requirements necessarily. So I think we're now in that transition where, and we're going to be replacing systems a lot in the next few years, is that we make kind of the whole recording of these events, we need to make it part of the MVP. Because otherwise we end up in a little bit of a pickle afterwards where, you know, we've got a few years of data, we try to analyze it and produce some meaningful results, but the conclusion is that the quality of the data isn't great. So the challenge, we've got the same challenge, but the way that we try to overcome that now is to make the whole recording of data for such processes now part of the minimum viable product of a new system, instead of making it an improvement that comes 2 or 3 years later.
More questions for Sjoerd here? Yes?
What were your selection criteria for selecting your pilot partner?
Can
was that sponsor engagement or something else?
Please, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so what were the selection criteria for kind of getting to our pilot? So I think for me there were, I guess there were 2 main criteria. The first one is I need a market where the data is readily available. So we've got already a spreadsheet that's on the shelf ready to go. That's the German. We had a lot of countries where the data isn't readily available, so I need to go through the process of, you know, setting the specs. Then they need to run a query, then, you know, it was going to be months and months before we got the data set, and we would have lost momentum, to be frank. And the second one was following the smile. So, you know, I think particularly for such pilot, I want people that are engaged. So when I mentioned process mining, you know, those people from the business who are going to be working with you to provide the necessary context and develop your questions and look at the results, I want that person to be genuinely interested. I'm not going to be dragging a dead horse around. And in some countries, you'll start the process and you don't have that momentum. And I don't think that makes such pilots successful. So it happened to be that in Germany, we had kind of the data set ready to go, whilst at the same time we were following the SMILE, which was for me, I think, a great way to try and make the most out of this experiment.
Great. Maybe one more question over here.
Thank you very much for the talk, especially for someone working in the German financial industry. It's very interesting, your insight. I have two questions. First, from what I understood, it is kind of a top-down approach that you took. At which point, or did you engage with the people who really execute the tasks? From my experience, this can be really a helpful thing, especially if they really think, oh, the system is configured in a wrong way or something like this. And the second question...
Maybe let's take the first one first. Can you repeat?
Yeah, so the first question is, at what stage did you start engaging with, members in the business in Germany that knew what they're talking about? And I guess the answer to that question is I didn't get them involved in kind of the whole data extraction and data validation stages. I started getting them involved when, we've gotten down to kind of the chart that gives us all of the events logically organized for less than 1% of the variance. So that was in the stage where we've done a little bit of discovery and we're trying to further segment the data and to draft the research questions. And I think also who we got involved is, I didn't really kind of get involved, the people who do the daily processing. So we've got contract administrators. I involved the kind of the team leader level or the specialists in the team who, haven't just done the processing or are doing the processing, but they're kind of processing plus. So they've got a little bit more of the ability to take that helicopter view to kind of reflect on what they're seeing in relation to their kind of understanding of the processes. So it's not management level. So we've got somebody who's done and understands the processes, but it's also not being the contract administrator level. It needs to be somebody who can have not just that operational, but also that tactical perspective.
Let's take the second question offline and let's continue discussing over lunch. Let's thank Sjoerd once more. Thanks very much.